Today I'm going to put former superstars back into their prime and see how differently the league would be. First off, we have Slap Me Silly Sidney Crosby. I mean, what more can you say about him? One of the greatest of all time, and now he's going to be back into his prime at a 97 overall. Next up, we have the great 8, Alex Ovechkin, 96 overall, back into his prime. I mean, he almost scored 50 goals this year, but he was scoring 60 goals back in his prime. That is a huge positive for the Washington Capitals. Pittsburgh Penguins continue to be stacked as they got Evgeny Malkin at a 95 overall. Malkin was in fact him back in the day. Malkin was goated back in the day. The San Jose Sharks are going to get prime Erik Karlsson, 2017 playoff run Karlsson, a 95 overall, best defenseman in the entire world. I mean, he was the third best player in hockey at that point. That playoff run he had with Ottawa in 2017, that was insane. Moving along, Tampa Bay gets even more stacked as they have prime Steven Stamkos at a 94 overall. Not much more to say here. Tampa Bay is absolutely stacked. Stammer was that guy, man. Scored 60 goals. LA is going to get prime Drew Doughty at a 94 overall. In his prime, Drew Doughty was one of the best defensemen in the entire NHL. Now, not so much, but back then, man, very good offensively, very good defensively, just an overall very good defenseman. Now, the New York Rangers are very interesting. They're going to get Patrick Kane at a 93 overall. Patty Kane in his prime was probably better than a 93, so I probably should have changed that, but oh well, we're going to run with it. Patrick Kane was one of the best players in the entire NHL back in his prime. That 2016 season where he won the Hart, the Art Ross, and the Ted Lindsay, right after that scandal he had in the offseason, yeah, Patrick Kane was in fact him. Toronto is going to get a prime John Tavares at a 93 overall. Now that I'm looking at it, yeah, Patrick Kane definitely should have been more than a 93. Johnny T, though, 93, well deserved. He was very good with the Islanders, and he was even very good with the Leafs, too. But I mean, the last couple seasons, not his best seasons overall. Chicago's going to get prime Jonathan Toews at a 93 overall. I mean, back in his prime, we were having debates between Crosby or Toews. That's how good Jonathan Toews was. Best defensive forward in the league, maybe at the time, and he was winning Conn Smythe, Stanley Cups, a hell of a leader. Back in his prime, man, he was very good. LA will get a prime Anze Kopitar at a 93 overall. Just like Jonathan Toews, he was very good offensively and very good defensively. He won a couple of Selkies, I believe. He was one of the best players in the entire NHL in his prime, so a 93 is well deserved. Now, I thought this one was very funny as the Calgary Flames are going to get Jonathan Huberdeau at a 92 overall. I mean, his prime was literally last season, but I mean, after the biggest drop-off in NHL history, I had to put him back into his prime so he can put up some points for Calgary, because Calgary is damn bad right now. The Ottawa Senators are going to get Claude Giroux at a 91 overall. He put up 100 points in his prime, and he was very good for Philly for a number of seasons. Does anybody remember that big hit he laid on Crosby in the playoffs? I think it was like the first or second round. In the very first shift of the game, he lays out Crosby and then goes in and scores. That was the greatest first shift of all time. The Capitals are also going to get prime Nicholas Backstrom at a 91 overall. One of the best passers of his era. I mean, he did play with Ovechkin, but he was feeding Ovi one-timers constantly, and he got a lot of assists from Ovechkin, but he was one hell of a passer, man. He also hit 100 points one time in his career, something I did not know. Pittsburgh is absolutely stacked as they're going to get Chris Letang at a 91 overall. A prime Chris Letang before his 2 strokes was one of the best defensemen in the entire NHL. He was very good for a very long time, so he definitely deserves that 91 overall. Dallas is going to get Tyler Seguin at a 90 overall. I mean, I have no idea what happened to him and why he fell off, but he was one of the best players in the world at one point. Him and Jamie Benn were a dynamic duo, but I mean, in the last like 4 or 5 years, he really fell off. He's not the same player he once was. I think a 90 is well deserved. Boston is going to get a prime Taylor Hall, who won the Hart Trophy and is a 90 overall. That year where he carried the Devils to a playoff spot and won the Hart Trophy over like Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon. Taylor Hall had a great season that year. Dallas is going to get a prime Ryan Suter at a 90 overall. One of the best defensive defensemen in the entire league in his prime. He was that shutdown #1 D-man, and for some reason in EA Sports' games, he was always like a 94 or 95 overall, and I never understood it. I think a 90 is very fair for him. Carolina will get a prime Brent Burns at a 90 overall. One of the best offensive D-men in the entire NHL at that point. He was putting up like 80-point seasons and almost 30-goal seasons as a defenseman, so the 90 overall is well deserved. The Rangers will also get Vladimir Tarasenko at a 90 overall. I mean, he was on the cover of NHL 17. That's how good he used to be. Now for goalies, the Montreal Canadiens are going to get a prime Carey Price at a 96 overall. Price was the best goalie in the entire NHL in his prime. One of the best goalies of all time, really. I mean, I wouldn't put him top 5, but a best of our generation. Too bad he never won a Stanley Cup, but man, he was a dog. I think 96 is well deserved. The Vegas Golden Knights are going to get a prime Jonathan Quick at a 94 overall. Those 2 cup runs he had with the Kings, he was absolutely insane. He's a Conn Smythe winner and a big-time playoff performer. I mean, he was absolutely unbeatable in 2012. The Florida Panthers are going to get a prime Sergei Bobrovsky at a 92 overall. I mean, mean, that's what they were hoping for when they paid him, what was it, $10 million when they first signed him? But I mean, Bobrovsky is a two-time Vezina winner. Put some respect on that man's name. The Minnesota Wild are going to get a prime Marc-Andre Fleury at a 92 overall. Marc-Andre Fleury didn't have the highest peak out of any goaltender, but he was very good for a very long time. So he has that longevity, and I think a 92 is very fair for him. And finally, the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to get a prime Matt Murray at a 90 overall. Yes, a 90. This may be controversial, but when he won back-to-back cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins, he was playing at a 90 overall. He was very good in those 2 cup runs. He just couldn't stay healthy, and he kind of fell off, to be honest. Alright, so we know all the players. Let's get into the video. Alright, now it's time to simulate. At the end of season number 1, the Islanders would finish first in the Metro. Boston would finish first in the Atlantic. Colorado would finish first in the Central. And Calgary would finish first in the Pacific. Nathan MacKinnon would have the, oh my god, he scored 70 goals. Greatest player of all time. MacKinnon had the greatest season of all time, followed by Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. Wow, I cannot believe MacKinnon. 70 goals and 131 points. I don't call him the GOAT for no reason. Erik Karlsson would have the most points by any defenseman with 73, followed by Cale Makar, John Carlson, and Drew Doughty. Aaron Ekblad would actually have the most goals by any defenseman with 22, followed by Roman Josi, Noah Dobson, and Devon Toews, same thing. Jonathan Quick would have 40 wins on the season. Where is Carey Price at? Sadly, Carey Price did not have a great year. 25 wins, 3 shutouts though, 9 save percentage, but a 3.110 goals against average. And this is what our year 1 playoff matchups look like. The Dallas Stars would end up winning the Stanley Cup as they sweep Tampa in the Stanley Cup final. Robertson would have the most points in the playoffs, followed by Kucherov, Hintz, Pavelski, and Braden Point. Nathan MacKinnon is the greatest player of all time. Cale Makar would somehow take home the Norris. The Conn Smythe would go to Jason Robertson, the Vezina to Freddie Anderson, and the Selke to Jonathan Toews. At the end of season number 2, the Penguins would finish first in the Metro. The Buffalo Sabres would finish first in the Atlantic. Colorado would yet again finish first in the Central, and the Vegas Golden Knights would finish first in the Pacific. Tage Thompson would actually have the most points by any player in the entire NHL, followed by Sidney Crosby, Sid the Kid, baby. Alex Ovechkin, who scored 61 goals. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Austin Matthews. Shout out Nicholas Backstrom, too. Ovi and Crosby at the top, baby, just like they were in their prime. But Tage Thompson, man, 39 goals, 72 assists, 111 points. Erik Karlsson would yet again have the most points by any defenseman with 80, followed by Seth Jones. That is interesting. Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, and Roman Josi. Dougie Hamilton would have the most goals by any defender with 19, followed by Roman Josi, Ivan Provorov, and Erik Karlsson. Matt Murray would have the 3rd most wins by any goaltender in the entire NHL with 37. Carey Price would have 34 wins and 2 shutouts. Jonathan Quick would have the most shutouts in the entire NHL though, and he would also have 30 wins with the Vegas Golden Knights. And this is what our year 2 playoff matchups look like. The Colorado Avalanche would end up winning the Stanley Cup as they beat Buffalo in 5 games. Tage Thompson somehow carried Buffalo all the way to the Stanley Cup final. MacKinnon would have the most points in the playoffs with 31, followed by Rantanen, Pasternak, and Taylor Hall. Tage Thompson would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Ovechkin would take home the Maurice Richard. The Norris yet again to Cale Makar somehow. The Conn Smythe to the GOAT, Nathan MacKinnon. The Vezina to Georgiev, and the Selke to Anze Kopitar. At the end of season 3, the Flyers would finish first in the Metro. The Tampa Bay Lightning would finish first in the Atlantic. Colorado would yet again finish first in the Central. And Vegas would finish first in the Pacific yet again. Nathan MacKinnon would have the most points in the entire NHL yet again, followed by David Pastrnak, Artemi Panarin, Nikita Kucherov, and Mikko Rantanen. Okay, I'm gonna try to pronounce this name. It's not gonna go well. Vesa Tuparainen. Definitely butcher that. Had the most goals by any player in the entire NHL with 64 at age 20, followed by Nikita Kucherov, Alex Ovechkin, Austin Matthews, and David Pastrnak. Who the hell is this guy, dude? He had 45 goals last year. He has back at ya as his zone ability. Cale Makar would have the most points by any defender in the entire NHL with 82, followed by Erik Karlsson and John Carlson. Brent Burns would have the most goals by any defenseman with 17. Georgiev would have the most wins by any goaltender with 42, followed by Dustin Wolf, Thatcher Demko, and Sergei Bobrovsky. Georgiev would have the most shutouts in the entire NHL with 9. And this is our year 3 playoff matchups. The Buffalo Sabres would end up getting their revenge on Colorado as they beat them in the Stanley Cup final in 5 games. What a revenge tour for Buffalo. Jacob Voracek would actually have the most points in the entire playoffs with 31, followed by Tage Thompson, Elias Lindholm, Jonathan Huberdeau. The GOAT, Nathan MacKinnon, would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. The modern day Alex Ovechkin would take home the Maurice Richard, Makar with his 4th straight Norris, the Conn Smythe would go to Jacob Voracek, the Selke to Alexander Barkov. At the end of Season 4, the New York Rangers would finish 1st in the Metro, the Tampa Bay Lightning would finish 1st in the Atlantic, yet again Colorado finishes 1st in the Central, this time with 62 wins, and the Vegas Golden Knights would finish 1st in the Pacific. Yet again, McKinnon would have the most points in the entire NHL, followed by Connor McDavid, Connor Bedard, and Kaprizov. McKinnon would also have the most goals in the entire NHL, followed by this guy, Ovechkin, and Matthews. I can't even try to pronounce his last name, so we're just going to call him Vesa. Makar would yet again have the most points by any defender with 90, followed by Erik Karlsson, Quinn Hughes, and John Carlson. Georgiev would have 52 wins, an NHL record, followed by Igor Shesterkin, Linus Ullmark, and Ilya Sorokin. Man, Georgiev is a monster in these simulations. He would also tie for the most shutouts in the entire NHL with Jake Ottinger with 5. And this is what our Year 4 playoff matchups look like. Tampa Bay would yet again win another Stanley Cup as they beat Minnesota in 5 games in the Stanley Cup final. Pacioretty would actually have the most points in the entire playoffs with 27, followed by Matthew Boldy, Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and Steven Stamkos. Nathan MacKinnon is the greatest player of all time. Cale Makar is the greatest defenseman of all time. Sergachev, what the hell? Sergachev would take home the Conn Smythe, and Georgiev did not win the Vezina. It would go to Vanacek, and the Selke to Bo Horvat. At the end of Year 5, the New York Rangers would finish 1st in the Metro. Buffalo would finish 1st in the Atlantic. Wow, they are having a really good sim. Colorado yet again finishes 1st in the Central, and Vegas would yet again finish 1st in the Pacific. Nathan MacKinnon is the greatest player of all time. He had the most points in the entire NHL, followed by Vesa, Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, Svechnikov, and Jason Robertson. Nathan MacKinnon would also have the most goals in the entire NHL, followed by Matthews, Vesa, Robertson, and Kucherov. Makar would have the most points by any defenseman with 88, followed by John Carlson, Miro Heiskanen, and Mo Seider. Looks like Erik Karlsson has finally trailed off. Vasi would have the most wins by any goaltender with 45, followed by Darcy Kemper and Devin Levi. Most shutouts in the entire NHL would yet again go to Georgiev. And this is what our Year 5 playoff matchups look like. And the Colorado Avalanche prove why they're the greatest team of all time as they beat Boston in the Stanley Cup final in 7 games. Colorado's just too good. Every simulation I do, they are by far the best team every single time. It's literally unfair. Like, I don't know what to do. Do I just lower all their overalls? Marchand would actually have the most points in the entire playoffs with 33, followed by Nathan MacKinnon, Claude Giroux, Mikko Rantanen, and David Pastrnak. Nathan MacKinnon is literally the greatest player to ever play hockey, and Cale Makar is the greatest defenseman ever. The Conn Smythe would go to Nathan MacKinnon, no surprise here. The Vezina to Georgiev, and John Tavares would actually take home the Selke. That's gonna do it for this video, boys. The Colorado Avalanche were just too good for everybody else. They had the best defenseman, they had the best forward, they had the best goalie in all 5 seasons. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn notifications on so you don't miss a single upload. And remember, don't be silly. Wrap your willy. Bye!